The bank manager turned the monitor toward me slowly, like he was bracing himself for what I was about to see. And then there they were, both of them smiling, walking side by side through the bank lobby, carrying a sealed document envelope that I instantly recognized. My hands went cold. My daughter's entire future, $100,000 in bearer bonds left by my late father specifically for her college education, was in that envelope. And my mother and sister had just walked out the door with it like it was nothing. Like it was theirs. I want you to stay with me through every single piece of what I found, because this story is built on receipts, and by the end you are going to understand exactly how I made sure justice was the only destination my family reached. Let me take you back to the beginning, because none of this makes sense without understanding who my father was and what he built for us. My dad passed away 3 years ago after a long illness. He was a quiet, careful man, the kind who read every line of every contract, who kept paper records of everything, who believed that money was a tool for security, not status. Before he died, he established a safe deposit box at our local bank branch and filled it with bearer bonds totaling $100,000. Bearer bonds, for those who don't know, are essentially financial instruments that belong to whoever physically holds them. They are as good as cash. My father knew that. He chose them deliberately because he wanted the funds to be accessible but protected, outside of a probated estate, outside of family squabbles, held specifically for my daughter Mara's education. He put the box in my name. He gave me the primary key. And because he was practical about emergencies, what if I was hospitalized? What if something happened to me? He listed my mother as a secondary authorized key holder. Emergency access only. That was the understanding. That was always the understanding. He told me this directly. He told her directly. I was in the room. The word emergency, as it turned out, meant something very different to my mother than it did to my father or to me. For 2 years after my father's death, everything seemed fine. I checked in on the box twice a year, confirmed the contents were intact, updated the bank on my contact information. The last time I personally verified the bonds was 14 months before the day the bank manager turned that screen toward me. 14 months. That is the window my mother and sister used. I only went to the bank that afternoon because I had started thinking about Mara's college timeline. She was 15, and I wanted to begin researching how to properly liquidate bearer bonds and move the funds into an education account. I walked in with my key, introduced myself to the branch manager, and asked to access the box. He asked me to step into his office. And that is when he told me the box had been accessed 4 days earlier by the secondary key holder, my mother. He pulled up the access log first. That was the first piece of evidence. A clean, time-stamped digital record showing the date, the time, 11:14 in the morning, and the name of the key holder who signed in. My mother's signature was right there on the access form, neat and confident, like she had every right in the world. Beside her on the visitor log was my sister's name, listed as an accompanying guest. The bank had no policy against a key holder bringing someone with them into the vault area. They had no reason to suspect anything. My mother had legitimate secondary access. She simply used it for something that was not remotely an emergency. Then he turned the monitor toward me, the security footage, and there they were. My mother in her favorite cream blazer, my sister in a floral dress, both of them composed and cheerful, walking out of the vault corridor with a document envelope. No looking over their shoulders. Just 2 women who believed completely that they had done nothing wrong. I sat in that office chair and I did not cry. I want to be honest about that. I felt something colder than tears. I asked the manager for a certified copy of the access log, a copy of the entry authorization form my mother had signed, and I asked whether the bank could preserve the security footage as a formal record. He looked at me carefully and said he would need to involve the bank's compliance officer. I told him that was exactly what I wanted. I was not leaving that office without documentation. That was the moment this stopped being a family conflict and started being a case. Now, here is the part that is going to make your stomach drop. because I still did not know the full story yet. I knew the bonds were gone. I knew my mother had taken them. What I did not know, not yet, was what she had done with $100,000 in bearer bonds belonging to my 15-year-old daughter. I was about to find out in the most infuriating way possible. I called my mother that evening. I kept my voice even. I told her I had been to the bank. I told her the box was empty, and I asked her, calmly, if she knew anything about that. There was a pause on her end, and then she did something I was not prepared for. She did not deny it. She sighed, actually sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable, and she said, "We needed to talk about this anyway. Come over Sunday. Your sister will be here." I wrote the date down, and I spent those 4 days building my paper trail. The second piece of evidence came from a phone call I made to a financial crimes attorney the very next morning. I explained the situation, the bearer bonds, the secondary key holder, the access log, the footage. She told me something that sharpened everything into focus. She said that while my mother had legal authorization to access the box, she had zero legal authority to remove or convert the contents. The bonds were titled, "Assets belonging to the box account holder, me, held in trust benefit for my daughter." My mother's secondary access was a physical key privilege, not an ownership right. What she had done had a name. It was called unauthorized conversion of assets. In our state, at that value, it was grand theft, felony level. The attorney also told me to get a formal written statement from the bank confirming the contents of the box at the time of my last verified access. I went back to the bank the next day. The compliance officer had already been briefed. They provided me with a written inventory confirmation, signed and dated, documenting that the box had contained bearer bonds with a face value of $100,000 as of my last access 14 months prior. That was piece of evidence number 3. A certified institutional record of what was taken. By the time Sunday arrived, I had a folder, entry authorization form, security footage preservation notice, attorney consultation summary, written inventory confirmation. I walked into my mother's house with that folder under my arm, and I sat down at her kitchen table across from her and my sister, and I waited. My mother poured tea. My sister looked pleased with herself in a way that made my jaw tight. And then my mother explained it to me like she was describing a perfectly logical business decision. My sister was getting married. A destination wedding in Europe. She named the country, named the venue, described the guest count. The family, my mother said, needed to show up with dignity. The venue deposit alone was $30,000. The flights, the accommodations for close family, the catering upgrades, the dress, the photographer, it added up fast. And so my mother had decided that Mara's college fund was the solution. She said, and I am going to give you her exact words because they matter. She said, "Mara can get loans like everyone else. Your sister only gets one wedding. The family name means something, and we are not going to embarrass ourselves in front of everyone." My sister nodded. She actually nodded, and then she added that my father would have wanted the family to celebrate properly, and that he had been too conservative with money his whole life anyway. They spoke about my daughter's future in the past tense, like it was already spent, like they had already decided, and my feelings about it were just an administrative inconvenience. I did not throw the folder on the table. I asked one question. I asked my sister when the wedding party was flying out. I said I understood. I thanked my mother for the tea, and then I called my attorney from the parking lot and told her it was time to file. The fourth piece of evidence was the one that sealed everything. My attorney contacted the bank's legal department and formally requested the complete surveillance record, not just the clip I had seen, but the full vault corridor footage showing my mother removing the bonds from the box and transferring them to the envelope. The bank cooperated fully. Bearer bonds are flagged instruments. Their removal from a custodial account triggers compliance review under federal banking regulations. The bank's own compliance team had already flagged the transaction internally. My attorney's formal request simply accelerated what was already moving. Within 72 hours, we had a certified copy of the full surveillance sequence, a compliance incident report generated internally by the bank, and a formal letter from the bank's legal counsel confirming that the secondary keyholder access had been used outside the scope of its authorized purpose. That letter was the fourth piece, an institutional third party with no stake in my family drama, confirming in writing that what my mother had done was not authorized. We filed the criminal complaint 6 days after my Sunday visit. Unauthorized conversion of assets. The filing named my mother as the primary actor and my sister as a knowing recipient of converted funds, given that she had been present during the removal and had directly benefited from the proceeds. The detective assigned to the case reviewed our documentation and told my attorney it was one of the cleaner financial crime submissions he had seen. Everything timestamped. Everything corroborated. No gaps. Now I need to tell you about the airport, because this is the part people ask about most. The wedding party was scheduled to fly out on a Thursday morning. International flight. Early departure. My mother, my sister, her fiancé, and several family members were all booked on the same itinerary. What my sister did not know, what none of them knew, was that the moment criminal charges were filed, the case triggered a parallel financial investigation. Bearer bonds that have been reported as stolen assets become flagged instruments. If they have been exchanged, deposited, or used to make payments, those transactions become traceable. My attorney had already provided the investigating detective with the bond serial numbers, which my father had meticulously recorded in a separate document he had given me years ago. That document was the fifth piece of evidence. My father's own handwritten register of every bond in that box, serial number by serial number, stored separately in my home safe. With those serial numbers, investigators were able to trace the partial conversion of the bonds through a currency exchange and wire transfer sequence that my mother had used to fund the wedding vendor payments. Not all of the money had been spent. A significant portion, the investigators confirmed later it was just over $60,000 worth, had been converted and transferred. The remaining bonds, or their converted equivalent, were partially traceable. At airport customs, my sister was flagged. I am not going to pretend I know every procedural detail of what happened in that terminal, because I was not there. What I know is what the detective told my attorney afterward, and what I later read in the formal incident documentation. My sister was detained for questioning related to the transportation of assets connected to an open financial crimes investigation. The detention was not an arrest at the gate in the dramatic sense. It was a customs hold, a formal interview, a seizure of documentation she was carrying related to the wedding financial arrangements. Her fiancé and the other family members boarded. She did not. My mother was contacted by investigators that same morning at her home. She was not detained at that point, but she was formally interviewed and advised that she was the named primary subject of a criminal complaint. Her attorney, she had apparently called one the moment she realized I had actually filed, was present for that interview. The wedding vendors began canceling within 48 hours. The venue deposit had been paid through a wire that was now under investigation. The venue's own legal counsel advised them to freeze the booking pending resolution of the financial dispute. The photographer canceled. The catering company, which had received a partial payment from the same flagged wire transfer, also suspended their contract. A European destination wedding that had consumed my daughter's entire college fund dismantled itself transaction by transaction as each payment was traced back to stolen assets. I want to be honest with you about the part that hurt even while justice was happening. My extended family, aunts, cousins, my mother's friends, many of them turned on me immediately. I was called vindictive. I was told I had destroyed the family. One aunt left me a voicemail saying that my father would be ashamed of me for involving the police in a family matter. I saved that voicemail, not for legal reasons, just because I wanted to remember exactly how clearly some people revealed themselves in that moment. When you protect your child's future, the people who call you the villain are telling you everything you need to know about where they stand. Mara did not know the full story during those weeks. She knew something serious was happening with family finances. She knew I was stressed. I kept her insulated from the worst of it because she was 15 and she did not need to carry that weight. I told her later, when the legal process had moved far enough, that I could explain it calmly and completely. Her reaction was quiet and thoughtful in the way she always is. She asked me if we were going to be okay. I told her the money was coming back. The civil recovery process ran parallel to the criminal case. My attorney filed a civil claim for full restitution, $100,000 plus legal fees and interest. Because the criminal evidence was so thoroughly documented, the civil case moved with unusual speed. My mother's attorney negotiated a settlement agreement that included full monetary restitution as a condition of a plea arrangement in the criminal matter. My mother ultimately pled to a reduced charge, a financial crimes misdemeanor with restitution and probation, after her attorney correctly assessed that going to trial against time-stamped bank records, certified surveillance footage, a compliance incident report, a third-party institutional letter, and my father's own handwritten bond register was not a winnable position. My sister received a deferred adjudication contingent on her cooperation and the return of any remaining converted funds she had access to. The full $100,000 was restored to a new custodial education account in Mara's name within 8 months of the initial filing. I removed my mother's name from every financial document, every account, every emergency contact form in my life. I changed my own safe deposit box to a single keyholder account. I had the bank flag my account for enhanced access monitoring. And I cut contact with my mother and sister completely. I want to tell you what I learned from every piece of paper in that folder, because I think it matters beyond my specific story. My father recorded those bond serial numbers because he was careful. That list, a handwritten piece of paper in a home safe, was the piece of evidence that made the bonds traceable when they left the box. Without it, the investigation would have been significantly harder. Document everything. Not because you expect betrayal, because documentation is the difference between a story you tell and a case you win. The bank's compliance system flagged the removal because bearer bonds are regulated instruments. I did not know that when I walked into the bank that afternoon. I learned it because I asked questions instead of just breaking down, especially when the answers are going to be hard. And the security footage, that footage existed because the bank had a standard vault corridor camera that ran continuously. My mother and sister walked through that frame, smiling, because they believed that confidence and family access made what they were doing acceptable. They were wrong. Cameras do not care about confidence. Records do not care about family dynamics. Timestamps do not negotiate. People ask me sometimes if I regret filing the charges, if I wish I had tried harder to handle it within the family. And I understand why people ask that. I understand the instinct to protect family, to absorb the wound privately, to choose peace over justice. I felt that instinct too. I felt it sitting in my car in my mother's driveway after that Sunday conversation, before I made the call. But here is what I came back to every single time doubt crept in. My father worked his entire life to build something for his granddaughter. He chose those bonds carefully. He recorded every serial number in his own handwriting. He set up that box so that Mara would have a foundation no matter what happened. My mother took that. My sisters spent it. And when I sat across from them at that kitchen table, neither of them showed a single moment of hesitation or remorse. They had decided my daughter's future was less important than a party, and they had done it with complete confidence that I would absorb it, that I would be too afraid of conflict, too loyal to family, too conditioned to keep the peace to actually fight back. They miscalculated. Mara starts college in 3 years. Her education account is fully funded. She does not know every detail of what I went through to protect it, and someday when she is older, I will tell her the whole story. I will tell her that her grandfather built something for her that outlasted even the people who tried to take it. I will tell her that documentation matters, that asking questions matters, that protecting the people you love sometimes means walking into a bank manager's office, sitting very still, and deciding that what you just saw on that screen is not something you are going to let stand. I will tell her that justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is a folder of certified records, handed quietly to the right people at exactly the right time. And if you are sitting somewhere right now, wondering whether the thing that was done to you is worth fighting for, whether the evidence you have is enough, whether the people who should be on your side will actually show up, whether the system will actually work, I want you to hear this. Build your paper trail. Document every piece. Find the professionals who know how to read what you have collected, and then trust what is true over what is comfortable. Because the truth, when it is properly documented, does not need you to raise your voice. It speaks entirely for itself.